Dr. Geetha Ramaswami Akka, Program Manager, SeasonWatch, Nature Conservation Foundation. And again, Yashashwini has a question for the speaker as well.
Geetha Akka, you're so involved in working with nature, but please share with us how to track climate change through trees.
Thank you so much for that question, and that's what I'm going to be talking about to all of you for the next half hour. Is it okay if I start?
You can go ahead, Akka.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll first share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen. Okay, I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about lots and lots of plants over the course of the next half an hour or so. And that's because I love plants. I really adore them. And if you think about it, really, there is no escaping plants in your life, right? If you're sitting near a window, if you look outside, there's probably some tree that's flowering and has a lovely red color or yellow colored flowers. What a joy looking at these things, no? This morning, probably you ate plants for breakfast. You will be eating plants for lunch and for dinner also. Maybe you ate something sweet. If not, maybe you'll eat something sweet later today. You know where that sugar comes from, right? It comes from a plant. You're probably wearing clothes that came from a plant. Your school uniforms or the t-shirts that you wear on a daily basis comes from the plant called cotton. And when you're really bored of looking at your screen, doing homework, all kinds of things, maybe you go out and play in a park, in a place where there are trees. Yeah, and that feeling of playing in the shade is such a joyous thing. So there is no escaping plants in our lives as humans, and we are completely and utterly dependent on them for our well-being, for living from one day to the other. And everyone knows that life would have been impossible without plants, because plants produce this all-important element called oxygen, and which helps us breathe, right? The earth is pretty old. It's 4.5 billion years old. And around 2.5 billion years ago, the first plant-like thing came to be, and it produced this miraculous thing called oxygen. And over the course of next few million years, plants were able to create so much oxygen that we had an atmosphere at the end of so much oxygen production. That led to the formation of the ozone layer. Yeah, without oxygen, there is no ozone. And this ozone layer, in turn, protects living things from getting fried from ultraviolet radiation. Yeah, so the evolution of plants actually paved the way for creation of the atmosphere as we know it today, and for all other living things to be able to survive and exist on this earth, on land, protected from those all-frying UV rays. And in the past 2.5 million years, plants have taken diverse forms. They go all the way from single-celled algae, like what you see in this picture over here, all the way through ferns and mosses to really large trees. So how are trees connected to climate? Before that, I would also like to mention that over the course of this evolution, 2.5 billion years is a lot of time. It's unimaginable amount of time. And over all this time, plants have not just created the atmosphere and made it useful for animals to survive in, they've also provided food over time for animals to live on. So this particular animal that you see is such a colorful, beautiful insect. This is the painted grasshopper. It's actually it's a young teenage version of the painted grasshopper. And this fellow over here is one of the many hundreds of species of invertebrates, of insects, of larvae of insects that actually eat plants. They are herbivores, and very different from the kind of herbivores we think of, right? When we think of herbivores, we are thinking of giraffes and elephants. They are herbivores as well, but the majority of the things that eat plants are actually insects. Over the course of millions of years, plants have also formed associations with creatures known as pollinators. So pollinators are basically animals that collect the pollen of plants, of flowers, and transmit it from one plant to another so that seeds can form. And in return, they get a reward for transmitting the pollen. They get nectar. So they get food in exchange for pollen. So this is another very intimate relationship that plants have with animals. And this has taken a long time to develop. Now, the third type of association that we all know of is what we have with plants, right? We eat the fruits of many plants. And just like us, there are many other animals that eat the fruit of the plant. And like Bittu sir mentioned just a little while back, the point of an animal eating the fruit of a plant is to basically ensure that the seeds from the plant actually move away from the plant. They get pooped out somewhere and a new plant grows somewhere else. And this is how plants actually expand their range. So plants are literally rooted to one spot, but you find them all across land, right? You find them in many, many places across land. How do they get there? They got there through seeds, and the seeds in turn are dispersed by these disperser animals. So over the course of a very long time, very intimate relationships have formed between animals and plants, and anything that affects these plants is very likely to affect the animals as well. So coming to the problem of climate change, firstly, how do trees track climate change? Before that, we need to do a small little geography lesson to understand where you find plants in the world in the first place, right? So this is the globe, and it is divided into different regions based on how far south or north you are on the globe. So the more further south or further north you go, the colder it becomes. And so you find the Arctic and the Antarctic Circle. Between these two zones are the temperate regions where it becomes rather cold in the winter, but there is also a good summer season where it's not so cold. And between the temperate zone is the subtropic and the tropical regions, which is warm, moist, nice, great environment for lots and lots of plants to grow over most of the year. And because the world is divided in this way, according to its climate, you find different types of plants in different places. So the trees that you take for granted around you and you see everywhere, those are most likely to be found only up to the temperate zone. You actually don't find trees beyond that. So the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle, you don't find trees there because it's just too cold and trees cannot survive that amount of cold. They'll just die. So there's a tree line on the globe that you'll see, and beyond that, you can't see any trees. So what's the connection with climate change? As you know, global warming induced climate change is basically the increase of concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which is leading to an average increase in temperature on the land, right? And what this is doing is, it is warming up the colder places on Earth. And there are two types of cold places on Earth where trees don't like it too much. And these are the northernmost and southernmost latitudes of the world and mountain tops. So if you were to go to a hill station where you find snow, you see a distinct tree line. There is a particular height beyond which trees can't grow, and you won't find trees there. But with climate change, global warming induced climate change, on average, the higher and the lower, the more northern and more southern latitudes are becoming more and more warm, as are mountain tops. So what scientists expect is this, that species that like warm, species like plants, which like a warm climate, will actually move further north or further south. Their ranges will expand. And how will they move? They'll move through dispersal by animals, right? So they'll move further north, or if they're found on mountains, they'll move further up the mountain. And it's all very well to, create an idea or a hypothesis like this. But how do you prove something like that? So scientists look at how species are found in a particular region at one given time, and then compare that at a later point of time and see whether some change has happened. Yeah. So here is an example. So there is this mountain range in Europe that has been observed since 1974. Yeah. And there is this plant called the larkspur, and it has a pollinator, the bumblebee. And in 1974, both of these species were found at a lower height. And then in 2007, scientists went and looked at where these species were found again. And they found that both of these species had actually gone up the mountain, more than 300 meters higher than where they were found in 1974. So they deduced that the climate warming had actually made these mountaintops easier to survive in, and that's why the larkspur and the bumblebee moved up. But is it always such a great thing? Maybe not. Here is a happy coincidence where both the plant and the animal that is dependent on it, both of them happen to move together at the same time up the hill. But what happens if only the plant moves or only the bumblebee moves? Then remember how these are very old associations, like over very long periods of times, plants and bees have made friendships. And so if one friend is lost, then we have a problem, right? So the larkspur may die out because there's nobody to pollinate it, or the bumblebee may die out because there is no nectar to feed on. So this is one way in which climate change affects plants and their pollinators. This is what we call changes over space. There is a whole other type of change that can happen because of climate change, and that is change over time. So plants have a seasonal cycle, right? When a plant puts out new leaves, or when it has flowers, or when it has fruits, is highly seasonal. And in the temperate regions of the world, this seasonality is extremely rigid. And that is because the winter is rather harsh in these places, right? And the trees, they cannot survive through the winter. So what they do is they shut shop during winter. They just shed all their leaves, and they shut down their metabolic factories, and they just go to sleep over the winter and wait for spring to come. And spring is when they will put out new leaves out into the open. Now, due to climate change, what is happening is that the season in which trees can have leaves is increasing. So the warm climate, which is good for plants to grow, is actually increasing. So imagine if, in 1900, plants could put out new leaves on, the 1st of April. Now they are able to do it on the 15th of March. Yeah, so it's earlier than usual, earlier than what was known through history. And why is that a bad thing? I mean, you would wonder, okay, trees are getting to grow for a longer period of time. That should be a good thing, right? Well, not so much if your life cycle is also connected to the life cycles of all other things like insects and birds. And I'll give you a quick example of that also. This species is known as the pedunculate oak, and many of you I heard are joining from Europe. So maybe you are familiar with this tree, maybe it's there in your neighborhood. This tree sheds all its leaves for the winter and then puts out new leaves during the spring season. And the new leaves that are put out by this species are eaten by the caterpillar of a moth called the winter moth. And the caterpillars actually come out of their eggs at around the same time the tree puts out the leaves, so that it has the leaves to eat. Now, this caterpillar in turn is eaten by birds, which nest around the same time. So they pick up the caterpillars to feed to their chicks, to the baby chicks. And this is a very nice example of a food chain that starts at plants and ends at animals. Now, because of climate change, the pedunculate oak is starting to put out leaves earlier than usual. Remember the example I said, like instead of 1st of April, it's starting to put out leaves on 15th of March. So what does the winter moth larva do? Does it hatch earlier now? Actually, yeah. So because the winter moth, it's an insect and it can adapt very fast, it can adjust very fast to changing conditions, it started hatching out earlier. So climate change made the pedunculate oak put out leaves earlier, which made the winter moth larvae come out earlier. But if the songbirds then start nesting earlier, because the winter moth larvae were, available earlier. Now that didn't happen. And that's because songbirds are actually complex animals. They have long lives and they can't very rapidly adapt. They are a little bit more delicate than insects when it comes to, adjusting to changes that are happening in their environment. So these fellows, poor things, they are still making nests at a much later date than when the winter moth larvae are available. So what does that mean? It means that they don't have enough winter moth larvae to feed their chicks. So maybe some fledglings are going hungry, and that might be really bad for the population of the songbirds, right? So now we have this really serious effect of the climate change where something changed in a tree, which changed an insect, but somebody else, some other animal which couldn't adjust to this change is now suffering. So climate change doesn't really not only impacts single species, like not only impacts single types of plants or single types of animals, but the whole intricate interaction that happens in between plants and animals are affected by climate change too. So coming back to the geography of the world, all of this is much easier to study in the temperate regions where there is a very clear summer, spring, winter season. Yeah. But in the tropical regions of the world, in this belt over here, where most of India also falls, seasons are very different. Seasons don't go as winter, spring, summer, fall, right? We have dry, hot summer, wet, hot summer, and then a dry, cool winter, and a huge monsoon season. And the monsoon season is bang in the middle of the year. There's lots of rain that happens during this time. So very different type of climate from the temperate regions. And how does that affect biodiversity? How does that affect plants? Plants love it here. Plants love the tropics. They like the warmth, they like the moisture, and there are lots and lots of the diversity or the kinds of plants that you find in the tropics is much, much higher than what you find in the temperate regions. And because there are so many types of plants here, it's actually just a little bit difficult to understand how climate change is affecting the species that you find in the tropical regions of the world. So here in the tropics, leaves, flowers, and fruits of trees are seasonal, which means that trees will put out new leaves and flowers and fruits at only some times of the year. But this is not usually related to temperature. So it's not related to winter and summer, but rather to maybe how much moisture is available, or whether it's going to rain soon or not, or whether it rained last year well or not. So not just temperature, but also rainfall and how much moisture is available. These are also things that affect tropical tree species. So here I'll take a little short break, and I would like to engage with all of you. I have a small quiz where I'll show you the pictures of a few tropical trees, and you tell me if you know, you can guess the name of the tree, and we'll see if most of you get them right. And then I'll tell you something interesting about these tropical trees. Can someone help me with the chat? You can write your guess in the chat. Asha, can you help me with this? Oh, okay.
Yes, sure, okay, I'll be here to help you.
All right, thank you. So this is the first tree. You have to look at the picture and guess the name. It's okay if you don't know this tree. You can just guess the name. What do you think is the name of this tree? Can someone please? Hi, can you tell me what most people are saying?
I wasn't able to hear you. Could you please repeat yourself?
Right. I mean, can you help me look at the chat and what children are responding?
So there are children answering Pongam Tree, Lilac. Yeah, those are the two answers.
Okay, great. So 10 marks to all the students who guessed Pongam Tree. This is actually a Pongam Tree, and it's a very common tree that you'll find across India. You will find it planted along roadsides and avenues. Because of this, it's nice, bushy kind of canopy. It provides a lot of shade, and it's really nice to walk under this tree, right? And most cities will have this tree planted. And this is a native tree, which means that this tree is, is a part of the Indian subcontinent, and many animals depend on this tree for their, livelihood. So Pongam tree is the correct answer. This is also a very seasonal tree. The Pongam tree drops its leaves during the dry season. And in southern India or peninsular India, typically the dry season starts in January and ends around March. So our fall season, the fall season in India actually goes from January to March. Whereas, in the temperate region, in the northern temperate latitudes, fall season is much earlier. That happens in October, November, right? That's what we know of the fall season from other latitudes. Okay, so what about this tree? Do you all know this tree?
So someone says powder puff, kadamba tree, golden shower tree, again powder puff, kadamba.
Right, great. So thanks everyone, and all those of you who answered kadamba tree, that's absolutely correct. This is another very beautiful tree that you get to see all across India, especially in cities, along avenues, in gardens. It's a huge tree, and it has this beautiful branching pattern, which is like, going straight out from the main trunk, like in right angles. So it's really beautiful to look at. And it has these really pretty round, bunches of flowers. This round thing is actually a bunch of flowers. Each of these little blobs here will grow into a proper flower. So here, this is actually a bud stage of the plant. And here in this picture, you can see open flowers, as in this. Yeah, these are all open, like the fully matured flowers. And this tree again is seasonal, but unlike the Pongamia tree, it doesn't drop all of its leaves in one go. In fact, what it does, it slowly changes. Some of the leaves will sort of dry up, they'll die off, and they'll fall. And then at the same time, it will also have these little new leaves coming right after that. And this happens over a very short period of time, over a month or so. And immediately, and these leaves are going to stay for a very long time on the tree. So the seasonal change or shift in when it has leaves is really short. And the flowers, of course, are also very seasonal. You don't find the flowers on this tree all year long. All right, last tree. Who knows what this tree is?
I see answers. They are saying Champaka. Champaka.
I'm so happy all of you all know your trees. So yeah, this is actually a Champaka tree, another very commonly planted tree especially in cities like Bangalore. And the flower is, it smells so wonderful, right? When you walk under a Champaka tree, it's a Champaka tree because of the smell, the scent of the flowers. And the Champaka tree is very different from the other two trees that we just saw. It's an evergreen tree, which means that at any given point of time in the year, you will find, fully formed bright green leaves on the tree. Even the flowers and the fruits sometimes are there throughout the year. So it's not very, very seasonal. Unlike the Pongam tree, it's very, very seasonal. And the Kadamba tree, which is kind of seasonal. And then there is this Champaka tree, which is hardly seasonal. It has most of these things most of the time. This thing that you see on the right here is the open fruit of the Champaka tree. And this red stuff is actually the seeds. The seed is actually coated in this sugary red cover. And birds and animals just love to feast on these seeds. You will see crows fighting over them, mynas there all the time, squirrels going berserk over these. And it's quite a nice, if you have a champaka tree in your neighborhood, which is fruiting, just sit next to it for 5 minutes and you'll see all the birds that are there in your neighborhood coming and eating the seeds. So the point I wanted to make with this series of trees is that in the tropical places, like where we live, leaves, flowers, and fruits are seasonal, just like, the leaves are seasonal in the temperate regions. But because in the same place, you find all these different types of tree behavior, it's very difficult to understand how is climate change affecting our trees. So can I say for sure that the leaves in the Pongam tree are coming earlier than usual? I don't know. This second picture over here is that of another beautiful tree called the golden shower tree. And this golden shower tree seems to be showing all kinds of strange behavior now. In the state of Kerala, where this tree is very important, people love this tree because it flowers at the same time as a festival called Vishu. Now this tree has started flowering earlier. And when Vishu comes around, people don't have this flower. They can't look outside and find a golden shower tree flowering. And what about mangoes? Yeah, mangoes used to be so seasonal. There was this peak summertime when we used to just wait for mangoes to come, and they used to disappear in the winter, right? They were not available during the winter time. But now mangoes seem to be there. We seem to get some or the other type or form of mango nearly throughout the year. So what's happening there? So these are all interesting questions that scientists as yet don't have answers to. So there is this large scale thing called climate change happening. We know that it affects trees in some or the other way, but how is it affecting the trees that are around us? That's still a question that needs to be answered. And so should we just sit and twiddle our thumbs and wait for scientists to do all the work? Or is there something that we can do? You and I, like you as students of your schools in middle and high school, and me as not a person who works in a lab, can we do anything? We can. We can become citizen scientists. So a citizen scientist is anybody who's not really trained to do science, like you don't have a degree in science, but you can still make scientific observations, ask scientific questions, and follow a scientific method to arrive at an answer. So there are many citizen science projects across the world that help you document the biodiversity around you. And why is it important to document biodiversity? The more we look at living things in our surroundings, the more we notice how they change with time and with the changes that are happening at the larger scale. And the other thing is, the more we look at trees and birds and insects in our surroundings, the more we like them, right? They become our friends, and we want to protect and nurture them all the time. So being a citizen scientist is a great way to start right away, whichever class you are in, you can already become a citizen scientist. And there are many projects that you can join. You could, if you like birds, if you like watching birds, you could join the eBird project. If you like looking at anything from fungi and insects to plants and even bacteria, you can join this project called iNaturalist. These are both international citizen science projects. And if you want to sort of restrict yourself to India, then you could join the India Biodiversity Portal, and you could get an adult, a parent or somebody, some grown-up near you to help you take photos and upload onto, this portal. And if you're interested in studying how trees are actually changing with the climate, then you can contribute information to SeasonWatch, which is the citizen science project that I manage. And it's a great way to make friends with the trees in your neighborhood and look at them again and again and see all the kinds of fascinating things that happen on and around trees. If you don't want to collect information, but you want it to be more of a documentation for yourself, then you can do it through art and this thing called nature journaling, where you just go spend some time in nature and document all the natural things that you see in your surroundings. So I hope that your initial question of how trees track climate change has been answered. But I'm happy to answer any other types of questions that you all may have. And I look forward to interacting with you all. Thank you. I can't hear you, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Akka. We do have a few questions for you. So the first one says, what new rules should the government and UN make regarding illegal wildlife trade?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What new rules should the government and UN make regarding illegal wildlife trade?
Okay. Maybe I'm not a good person to answer that. Maybe Bittu sir can answer that at a later point of time. I would be better at answering any tree-related questions. Sorry.
There was a small confusion. I'm going to read out the question again. What is the effect of increase in CO2 and temperature on the photosynthesis in trees or plants?
That's a great question. So trees anywhere across the world, they love lots of heat.
Just reading out what I was given.
Sorry. Okay. So trees everywhere love more CO2 and more higher temperatures, and that's always something better for photosynthesis. However, beyond certain temperatures, like beyond very high temperatures, the process of photosynthesis will stop because it's the plant cannot survive beyond those temperatures. So as long as the temperature is less than that maximum temperature that a plant can handle, higher temperatures and more CO2 is actually good for plants. But then there's only so much that a plant can utilize, right? So supposing there are 100 molecules of carbon dioxide in the air and a plant can only use 50, then it will only use 50. Those extra 50 molecules will still be hanging around in the air. So it's not like putting out too much carbon dioxide in the air is going to be always beneficial for plants, because plants can use only some part of that and not all of it. Yeah.
In regions of global warming, then if the
Sorry, you're on mute, so I didn't hear.
Hello? Yes, am I audible now?
Yeah.
If the mountain regions heat up due to global warming, then can trees survive there?
Yeah, they can. In fact, there is evidence that this tree line that I was talking about, this line, this place or height at which trees stop growing, that has gone up. So trees are moving slowly further up on the mountains. But smaller plants are able to do that better than trees right now. So maybe in the future, with more higher temperatures, trees will reach right to the top of mountains.
As plants can grow in colder regions, give me just a second. As plants can grow in colder regions due to the rising temperature, can this help solve the food crisis in the coming decades?
Yeah, if the plants growing at these latitudes are food plants that we can eat, then yeah, maybe they can be grown in those places as well. But like Bittu sir mentioned, this is an intricate network. Things are already interacting with each other in one way or the other. So would we want to then plant new species in places where we don't know the effect of what will happen in the future, even though the climate may be okay for that plant? But do we really want to go and interfere in what is happening there naturally? So you're right, hypothetically, we could maybe grow more crop plants as it gets warmer, but do we want to really do that? Do we want to disbalance nature in that way? Is the question. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, how will growing plants in our backyard or garden help, and how?
Right. You could grow all kinds of plants in your backyard. So I mentioned this thing called a native species. Yeah, so these are plants that have evolved have been for thousands, if not millions of years in the Indian subcontinent, you know, the landmass of India. You can grow such type of plants in your backyard. And why is that important? Because it will support the local pollinators, which are bees and butterflies, and it will feed the local fruit-eating birds and animals like, you know, bulbuls and squirrels and mynas, quails. If these things are there in your backyard, then you will also help sustain the other types of biodiversity. In terms of climate change, maybe that's not enough. That's not your backyard is not big enough to actually, you know, reduce the effect of climate change or suck in enough carbon dioxide from the air such that greenhouse effect is reduced. So you can, but you can definitely support local biodiversity by growing plants in your backyard.
Okay, this is the last question. What signs do you recommend looking out for when checking the condition of our nearby flora?
What signs? You mean of climate change?
Okay, I'll repeat the question once again. What signs do you recommend looking out for when checking the condition of our nearby flora?
Right. So one thing you can start doing is keeping a note of when something happens, right? So is there a tree or a plant near your house which becomes all brown and wrinkly suddenly one fine day, loses all of its leaves? What happens after that? Has the tree died? Is it gone? If it has died, then what could be the cause? Like what is happening around it? Did somebody put cement around it? You know, did somebody put a weedicide somewhere? Or if it's not died, then what is it doing? Did it get its leaves back after 2 weeks? And were those leaves different looking from what the tree or plant had lost earlier? So when you look at it again and again, when you look at plants again and again, you will be able to pick up signs of things like disease, you know, infections that plants get, or the other, you know, what people are doing to plants. You'll be able to pick up all of these signs. So signs of damage are, you know, things like galls or like these little bulb-like things that happen on plant leaves. You can keep a lookout for those. You can keep a lookout for somebody having chopped off branches, nailing things to trees. These are all things you can track.
Thank you so much, Akka, for that informative session. Thank you so much for answering all our questions and clarifying all our doubts. And here we have a beautiful picture drawn by one of the kids from Parikrama.
Lovely.
As a token of gratitude. And we have a kid from Parikrama here who wants to tell you something.
Thank you, Akka, for sharing such interesting facts about trees. We children will make an effort to grow more trees.
Thank you
you
once again.
Thanks a lot.